Good morning. We're going to get started. Today is the April 3rd Finance Committee meeting, and our focus is going to be on student services, and special education. And are you leading off? So Kim Frazier, lead us off.
Thank you, and good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. Actually, I am proud of the work that the department does for our students and families, so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you our proposed budget for 1920. So just to do a quick overview of the department, I serve in the role as the Director of Student Services and Special Education. We have 7 supervisors who work to also support the team. Their names are up there. The only change that we've had since last year, we have welcomed Stephanie Doyle as the new Special Education Supervisor for Early Intervention in grades K to 3 due to a retirement on the team. It's a large department. The scope of services that we provide affects every student and family in the district. These are the student services team members that are within our schools supporting students every day. The ones that are in boldface is an indication to you that those are areas where we are anticipating growth and need for additional personnel. So for our school nurses, we've seen an increase in some of the medical needs within our non-public schools, so we're going to need to do a slight increase to help support that, and we'll talk a little bit more about each of those as we move forward. We added a college access counselor that the board has approved for 1920, so that we have 1 full-time college access counselor in each high school. Speech therapists, behavior aides, and behavior specialists support our special education students. So due to the increasing number and needs of our students in special education, we've required an increase in those areas. And in terms of special education, we continue to see a growth in both of our autistic support programming and our emotional support programming. And so that continued growth also requires additional staff support. This is just a brief overview so you can get a sense of the overall budget for our department and seeing the breakdown in terms of where that money is spent. The special education portion, which is the largest portion of the budget, also includes gifted education within this pie chart. When we go through, we're going to look specifically at each of these 4 areas a little more in detail with some explanation of where the money goes in each particular department, and we'll also do gifted education as a separate breakdown. I think it's always important to share so that people have a sense of the scope of specialized services within the district. When you look at our number of students who are receiving some type of specialized plan, it adds up to 40% of our students. So when you look at the number of students receiving support through a 504, through a gifted IEP, or an individualized education plan for special education, that's 40%. So again, it's a large percent of our students who require some level of specialized support, and it's our department then that provides that support. So specifically related to health services.
Can I just back you up real quick? So does that consider overlap? Like 16% have IEPs, 14% have GIEPs.
There is an overlap. So currently we have 99 students who are duly identified, which means they receive both special education and gifted education services. They'll be reflected in the IEP number.
Okay, so this chart represents individual students, no?
It does, 16%, so it's that figure.
So the ones who have GIPs and IEPs are going to be in the IEP number.
Correct, that is correct.
And not in the GIP number.
That is correct.
The kids with 504 plans and IEPs will be in the 504? Or
You can't have a 504 and an IEP.
But
yeah, you can have a 504 and a GIEP. They'll be reflected in the GIEP number.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. So specifically related to our health services, you can see it's a very modest increase that we're proposing for next year. The majority of that is related to personnel costs. We do provide health services, as I've shared in the past. It's not just our students that attend Lower Merion schools, but we also are mandated to provide a certain level of health services for our non-public schools. And those things include our annual health screenings, medication administration, immunizations, physical exams, and health-related trainings. So we're responsible for providing a certain level of that support in our non-public schools as well. As I mentioned before, we are looking at an increase. There are some increase in intensity of needs in some of the non-public schools that are requiring the district to provide an increased amount of support. Our health services team members do so much to help support our students. We have over 450 504 plans that are in place because of significant medical needs. It might be life-threatening allergies, a seizure disorder, or diabetes. Those are just some examples. And then our health services team members also are part of the team that develops the emergency care plans. So those would be students who have an emergency response plan in place. Our health services team members also help provide staff training. All of our certified school nurses are trained to teach CPR, so we use them when we're able to help reduce cost in terms of CPR training. They provide they help support with parent training, and then also supporting with field trips and extracurricular. So we're also responsible for ensuring the health safety of our students when they're participating in extracurricular and field trips. We have an average of about 2 nurses per day that are supporting field trips.
Excuse me, Ms. Frazier, the 20 non-public schools that is the mandate that they must be located within our footprint?
That is correct. They fall within Lower Merion School District boundaries, and it doesn't matter what the district of residence is for those students. We're responsible for providing that health service.
Thank you.
So some of the highlighted costs, just to give you a sense of where some of the money is going, the technology-related supplies and fees. Health Master is the online system that we utilize to track health records and health information. General nursing supplies, our first aid supplies need to be replenished. Again, we have to provide a certain level of supplies for our non-public schools as well. Any emergency supplies, CPR training, and our AEDs. And then along with that, because of those mandated screenings and also the support that we're required to provide, there will always be a certain level of equipment repairs throughout the year that we're responsible for ensuring. Some of the other highlighted costs for health services, we do have a physician that we use as a consultant. They're required to help us do Department of Transportation exams, pre-employment exams. They help support with Human Resources Department as well as Student Services when there are employee or student health issues. Also does our reviews for medical assistance so we can submit billing for related services. And so this ends up being a cost of $120 an hour and is an essential part of the team. We also have a dental consultant that's required, again, for some of those mandated services, specifically for students in the grades listed. Again, it comes up to a cost of $120 an hour. We estimate that it takes 50 hours in a calendar year to be able to address those needs. An addition into the budget for health services is a proposed $5,000 for healthcare professionals. Terry Quinlan, who's with us today, has done an exceptional job developing a speaker series that brings in professionals from different areas. We've done mental health, technology, sleep-related issues, training sessions for parents so we can help provide information directly to parents. We've brought in Karen Foundation, and Matt Winterstein is an expert in terms of suicide prevention and mental health issues for our students. We've had him in. So this will allow us to continue to provide that speaker series. Again, Ms. Quinlan does that in collaboration with our HSAs and ISC. So it's been a very successful and well-received program. Key drivers for the budget for health services, as I've kind of mentioned throughout the information that I provided, the Department of Health has mandates, things that we're required to follow for both public and non-public. We have PA school code. And then for students with disabilities, if there's needs that are related to those disabilities, we're required to provide that. And again, as I've mentioned, you have the impact of the support for non-public schools. Moving on to our clinical services, you will see there's a slight decrease in the overall budget proposed for clinical services. This team includes our school psychologists, our school social workers, and the mental health counselors. This team really provides a level of crisis intervention support. They're critical in supporting our school teams when a crisis arrives with students. They participate on our school age transition team. Their key roles in our student assistance programs, achievement teams, IEP, and 504 teams. And they really do help to connect families with access to community-based services. We were able, the board approved adding an additional psychologist. By adding that additional support, we've actually been able to reduce some of our expenses because we are less reliant upon contracted services to address the work that needs to be done. Another nice thing that's heavily related to our clinical services, the Lower Merion Police Department, in collaboration with other community agencies in the district, has started a group called the Hub. It doesn't stand for, it's not an acronym for anything, it's the Hub. We've been meeting now for about a month. It includes representatives from the Student Services Department as well as myself, and Lower Merion Police, the Mobile Crisis, Lower Merion Counseling are some examples, the Office of Children and Youth. And we come together to confidentially talk about families and students who may be in crisis, and really to try to ensure that as a community, we are wrapping supports around families and students that need that support. And so it's been a really helpful way to really better support our students and families. So we're excited about that moving forward. One of the major drivers with the costs for clinical services is our child find responsibility. Our child find responsibility is simply that we're responsible for finding or locating any student that may have a disability through the age of 21, regardless of the severity of their disability. This responsibility extends to all district residents, so even if a student attends a non-public school, we are still the entity that is responsible for child find. So this impacts if a district resident chooses to send their child to a private school, but they would like the district to do an evaluation, then the district is responsible for conducting that evaluation to determine eligibility for special education. So we do approximately 80 to 100 evaluations for non-public school students every year. We also, with the Child Find, we have an early intervention process, so our children who are coming into us from early intervention, we're doing 40 to 60 evaluations each year as we're going into that school year. And there's approximately, 10% of our population that are being reevaluated and evaluated each year. So this kind of lets you know the scope of the work from an evaluation perspective.
So the evaluations of those students entering school for the first time, is that part of that 80 to 100?
No, those are the early intervention numbers. That's correct. That's separate.
Okay, so that's separate. And how many did you say that was? 40?
The 40 to 60 each year. It varies dependent upon need. And then the non-public is around 80 to 100. And then our school psychologists, we currently have 12, are doing approximately 100 evaluations each year per psychologist. Some of the highlighted costs that are associated with that, of course, as we're doing those evaluations, the assessment books, test protocols, those all have to be replenished, as well as we're shifting, companies are very much so shifting towards electronic scoring license, so updating those each year is required. Some other highlighted costs for the clinical services, additional psychological time. So this allows for us to be able to, as additional needs arise throughout The year that would require our psychologists to work beyond their contracted hour, we are able to pay for them to do that. Our psychologists are currently 10-month employees, so we also try to take advantage of the summer months to try to get some of those evaluations done by way, particularly for our universal screening process. Last year, as we were going into the summer of 2018, 179 students were recommended for an evaluation for gifted services. In the summer of 2018, we were able to complete 82 of those. What that allows us to do is to take some of the burden off of those elementary psychologists at the start of the school year. So it's really allowed us to be able to balance the workload and frankly has been essential for us to do that. Mental health therapists, I just wanted to highlight again that we continue to have 2 full-time therapists that we do through contracted support. One is assigned at each of our high schools. They provide resources and supports for students, preventative interventions, crisis interventions, and are critical members of our team.
Excuse me, real quick. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the acronym for the SAP teams. I apologize.
It's a student assistance program. And so it's a team that comes together to work to systematically eliminate barriers that might be facing a student. So drug and alcohol issues, mental health issues, and they're trained specifically to look at those issues and help to provide support.
Thank you.
Some of the key influences that drive the budget for clinical services, we do have very highly qualified staff. So when you think about the qualifications, particularly of our school psychologists, that comes with it a financial cost, but we do believe is very important given their level of expertise. There's also the federal and state mandates, including child find that I explained, and then there is an impact on the budget with the universal screening for gifted. Moving forward to our counseling department. Again, you can.
I apologize. I'm sorry. Before we move on, for the universal screening for gifted, do we do that for non-public students as well?
If a non-public student requests an evaluation for gifted, we're required to do that. We have the same child find responsibility. The numbers are much lower for that, though. So for our counseling department, there's an overall slight increase. Again, this is directly related to salary and the salaries and personnel costs. We do have a reduction in other expenditures. In the 18-19 school year, we know we needed to do work for the Act 339 plan that the board just approved, and so there was expenses related to that that are not needed to move forward into 1920. Again, we added an additional college access counselor to provide supports for our secondary students. Our counselors are integral members of the team in supporting students and families with really a comprehensive school counseling program looking at academics, career, personal development. Our teams work with also providing parent training and support. They also have 504 case management. So if a 504 is not related specifically to a medical need, it is the counselor that serves as the case manager and oversees that. Some highlighted costs for our counseling department. Costs related to the district's testing program. This is our PSATs, AP testing, the universal screening. The costs come from the counseling budget. We also have general supplies to include instructional materials. These are all programs that are well familiar within the community. Some examples are there for elementary and secondary. We also, within those general supplies, have a lending library in each of the schools, so there are resources for parents if they want to borrow some of those resources. And then we have technology-related supplies and fees, Naviance being the largest portion of that, and Naviance really is a key to that career and college preparing and development, and we're using Naviance earlier at this point, given the Act 339.
Okay, so the $40,000 includes the cost of the PSAT testing?
Yes, correct.
So that's not in the general education budget, that's in your budget?
It's under the counseling budget. Rich Marta is the supervisor. He's the supervisor of testing and holistic supports. So since he oversees that testing program, it falls under, and he's the supervisor that's directly responsible for this budget.
Okay, because for some reason I thought that just the PSATs alone were over that, but wow, that number is much smaller than I thought it would have been then. And the technology number includes the cost of the actual Naviance?
It does.
The site license?
That's correct. Yep, that's correct. There's been a slight decrease in the testing because we've elected to no longer do the ERBs in fourth grade. So that's been a significant reduction in the budget. Some other highlighted costs, we will need to continue to do some curriculum development based on the Act 339 plan. But it's a small cost as we're moving forward into 1920. And similar to our clinical team, our counseling team does need to do work in the summer. They are also 10-month employees, so any work that they do in the evenings and during the summer months, they are reimbursed for. During the summer months, we have students enrolling, we have preparation with scheduling, so the counselors need to come in and help get that set up so that so when the school starts on the first day of school, our students have programs in place and schedules in place as we are getting ready for the year. I wanted to point out as well, there's a lot that the student services team does related to student supports and specifically school safety. And so just to give kind of an overview and summary of some of the costs that fall within across the budgets that are related to this specific issue. So you see there the first one, prepare training. Prepare is a research-based program that really focuses on ongoing school safety. It's about preparedness and prevention, and then it also focuses on, in the event of a crisis, how do we ensure the psychological well-being of our students and our community. So we are committed to being able to train critical team members, which includes our building administrators and our student services team members, counselors, psychologists, school social workers, and some of our student services administrators. We actually had Dr. Naray, who is the supervisor of clinical services, and Ms. Terry Quinlan, who's the supervisor of health services. We had them trained to be trainers. So what we've been able to do with that then is to have them provide that training in district, and that's allowed for a larger scope of school employees to be trained at a significant reduction in cost. So by way of example, we did a training for the high school teams in March. And if we had paid to have all of those participants trained, it would have cost the district $30,000. And we were able to save that money because Terry and Adil were able to provide that training. And we will continue to move forward. There's actually 2 workshops that are involved in the prepare training. So there's workshop 1 and workshop 2, and they will be moving forward with training K-12 in both of those workshops. The Stop the Bleed kits have been discussed previously, so that in the event of an emergency, it's a quick way to be able to support when someone is in a life-threatening situation. CPR certification also is a support. We do use our nurses to provide what we can for the CPR certification, but there are a large mass of employees that we do train. For example, our paraprofessionals, our instructional assistants we train. So for those trainings, we do use American Red Cross to help support with that. Students Assistance Program that we just talked about requires specialized training just to be able to participate on that. When we have new staff, we have to send them for that training. Crisis prevention and safety care training, supporting and de-escalation strategies and support specifically of students with disabilities. So we have a pretty comprehensive training program related to that. And then another one that I just wanted to point out while we are talking about student supports and school safety, but we've actually covered this through the current year's budget, but I didn't want to be remiss in mentioning it. We are moving forward with a comprehensive school threat assessment guideline. This is a research-based program. Dr. Dewey Cornell was the lead researcher behind this, and it is nationally recognized as a method for responding to school threats. And it's a systematic approach that pulls together a team, including your key team members in the school itself, but also the police department. And so several of us went to be trained, and there were several representatives from Lower Merion Police that joined us in that training. We are moving forward with offering this training in district. Again, we're going to be able to get about 100 team members trained in May with this comprehensive threat assessment response. So it's an important way that we're helping our teams to be prepared in the event of crisis. So moving on to gifted education, we currently have slightly over 1,200 students identified receiving gifted support services. We are required by PA School Code Chapter 16 to provide services for students who are identified as gifted, and that those services have to be based on the unique needs of each student. Some of the highlighted costs related to gifted education are instructional materials such as Rosetta Stone, MVP, which is Montgomery Virtual Program, so that's some online coursework. These costs are K-12, so they're combined so that you can see the K-12 cost. The program evaluation, our response to that continues to move forward. There's a lot of work being done in that regard. As we're moving forward into the 1920 school year, there will be a lot of time spent on curriculum writing so that we're able to move forward and implement any changes in the 2021 school year. So we needed to add some additional money into the budget to help support with that curriculum writing. We also are proposing that we use an independent consultant to help support with the service delivery changes. So forthcoming very, very soon, the committee will be making recommendations to the board for potential, for service delivery specifically and what we'd like to see that service delivery look like. That will have budgetary implications. We will be using the 1920 school year to do planning with the intent that implementation, again, would begin in the 2021 school year. It's a pretty big lift to alter service delivery, which is why we believe it would be helpful to have an outside consultant. Very similar to how this year we're using Dr. Jonathan Plucker as an expert in gifted education and universal screening to come in and help support in evaluating and looking at our universal screening procedures. We also propose to continue participating in the Gifted Consortium. This is through Chester County Intermediate Unit, and it allows our gifted support teachers and Dr. Naray, who's the supervisor of gifted education, to participate in additional professional development opportunities in collaboration with other districts related to gifted education. And we've also used this consortium to provide training for our parents, and we would continue to recommend doing that. Moving on to special education, you can see there's a slight increase overall in the budget. The increase is coming from salaries and personnel. Some of the key drivers that influence the budget is highly qualified special education teachers and staff. And we do have a commitment in our district to the inclusion of students with disabilities. And so teams really do try to the highest degree to have students participating with their non-disabled peers as much as possible. In order to be able to successfully do that, it requires a high level of staff support, human resource support, so that we can successfully allow students to be included. So that, I believe, is a reason why the salaries and personnel cost is where it falls. Some of the highlighted expenses, just so that you get a sense, there's a lot that goes into providing special education services. This just gives you a broad overview of where some of that money is going. We continue to use specialized counseling for some of our secondary students who may require specialized support in social skills and peer interactions. As we're heading into adolescence, for students who have cognitive limitations, it can be a very confusing time for how do you deal with your emotions, your feelings, about other peers and how do you appropriately interact with peers. This has been a very successful support for the small number of students that require it. Occupational therapy, again, students who have disabilities that require occupational therapy. This might be in terms of fine motor skills, sensory needs. This includes our costs for both direct and consultative services. Same with physical therapy. These are more of your gross motor physical therapy needs, direct services to students with disabilities. Easter Seals is the independent contractor that we use to help support with extended school year. So we have a large number of students who are eligible to receive direct instruction in academic areas during ESY. So Easter Seals helps to provide that support. So it gives you a sense of the estimated costs. We also use MCIU for services where we are able. MCIU is the provider of our hearing services. So again, those are direct and consultative, and a hearing specialist comes from MCIU to work directly with those students and the staff working with those students. Same for vision. And orientation and mobility. Orientation and mobility is how do you navigate your setting. So this would be for students who are blind or visually impaired, who need to learn how to cross streets or actually navigate your school and your school community where age appropriate. We also continue to benefit from the support of behavior specialists. These are all master's level individuals who have extensive experience in behavior. They have a high degree of training. These behavior specialists support special education students. This year, there is an increase, so MCIU has increased their rates for next year. We currently are paying $510 per day per specialist. They are increasing that to $565 moving forward. But these are really integral members of the team. We've been very fortunate to have consistency with the behavior specialists that are assigned to us. And so we're excited to be welcoming them back again next year. And through all this, I always also like to point out that we are doing a lot of programmatic development in district. And this is just one example of an autistic support classroom. We recognized a need at the kindergarten level to do some improvements in the programming for autistic support students at the kindergarten level. We had students who required autistic support that were on grade level, able to be included in the general education curriculum for the kindergarten, for half-day kindergarten, but that they required behavioral and social support requiring a full day. And what we saw happening is that we might have 1 or 2 students in each individual school, so that when students were receiving that autistic support, they didn't have peers with them. They were really working one-on-one with a teacher, which goes counter to what the needs are of our autistic support population. So this past year, we pulled those students together and put them at Gladwin so that they would have a more comprehensive program. And so the teacher in that program co-teaches during the general education time, and then those students come together so they have a natural peer group. So it's been a very successful program. Another area where we've done a lot of program development, again, is in emotional support. For the first time this past year, we have a more comprehensive emotional support program at BC, so that the services at Welsh Valley and BC are now equivalent, and that was really based on student need and will now allow us to have students who require a more intensive amount of emotional support to remain in their home school. Again, we still have both emotional support programs in both of the high schools. At the elementary level, if students require a higher level of emotional support, they're at Marion Elementary, but we do have students in all 6 of our elementary schools receiving an itinerant level of emotional support. We also have worked on programmatic development at the high school in terms of learning support. We recognized a need for some students who were diploma bound, so they are required to do all of the state requirements, including the Keystone testing and those diploma requirements, but have significant learning needs where their literacy skills and their functional math significantly influence their ability to access the curriculum. So we did some program development, that's at Harriton High School, for those students who require a more intensive level of support. So it includes more co-teaching, some additional courses that focus on math literacy and academic literacy to help support, because those students also have to continue in the general education curriculum. So we are doing a lot to develop programs in district. Again, we have a commitment to having students remain in their home schools to the degree possible, and certainly within our community. We so moving on along those lines, our out-of-district placements, our students that are in out-of-district placements, we are steadily around 38 to 43. 43 tends to be our high number for students that are in out-of-district placements. Over the years, we've worked really hard to be able to develop programming in district to allow students to be able to stay. But there are times where students' needs exceed what we're able to provide within our district schools, and we have to look at specialized programs. I highlighted specifically the amount of the special education budget that goes towards out-of-district placements. And this is one area where there's things within the special education budget that we don't have control over. Each child has an individual IEP team that's making decisions based on that individual student's needs, and cost cannot be a factor in that per IDEA. So teams are really putting together programs that students require based on their disability. If that's an out-of-district program and students move to an out-of-district school, we don't have control over the tuition costs in those schools. So this is just to give you an example of the range of what some of the schools cost that we currently have students placed in. You can see it's a pretty wide range. In this example, from anywhere from like 38,000 over 100,000. And that does not include ESY. That does not include a one-to-one aid. If students in these programs require one-to-one aid, that's usually around $32,000 to $35,000 in addition to the tuition, and then any specialized transportation costs. Once a student goes into an out-of-district placement, it becomes their pendant placement, which means we're required to keep them in that placement until the IEP team determines otherwise. So if schools elect to increase their tuition, the district has to agree to that tuition increase. Over the years, it usually tends to be about 3 to 5% increase every year, depending on the program.
Do you have a sense of how the number of students has changed over the years? I mean, it's, for some reason, my recollection is at one point we had close to 100 students out.
It was high. I can pull the numbers. I don't recall them off the top of my head, but I would say even in 2011, I think we were pushing over 60 students, 60,
Right.
65. So we've steadily been able to decrease that number. And even as we look at that number, it's 43 currently. We have students who are graduating or aging out, and the supervisors of special education stay involved with those students. And there's several students that we're looking to bring back in district. So as we leave this school year, I actually anticipate that number to fall well below 40. So we continue to work to do that, recognizing, though, that it's really about ensuring that we're meeting students' needs. And sometimes we have to have the out-of-district placements.
Right, because I'm just looking at some of these schools are very specialized
They are.
in
That's
the
correct.
types of disabilities
That's correct.
they manage.
That's correct. HMS is a good example. So HMS, students who attend there, HMS is a school for children with cerebral palsy. A lot of the students that attend HMS have significant medical needs and complications, and they have a high degree of support there, highly specialized support that we can't offer in district. Melmark is highly specialized. It's an ABA program, highly specialized for students with autism who have significant behavioral needs.
I always thought that was more Downs. Do they do children with Downs as well?
Melmark is a school for autistic support students. You might be thinking of Camp Hill.
Or maybe it's changed, because
Some of the key influences within special education, of course, are federal and state mandates that give us the requirements for what we're required to do. And then, as I mentioned, every day IEP meetings are happening where individual teams are making decisions based on each individual child. And so we can't always know at any given moment what a child might need, and so there has to be flexibility in that. We also continue to see an increase in newly enrolled students, and we do also see a trend of having newly enrolled students who have pretty intensive needs. We always hear that local medical providers and other local agencies will specifically say to new families, move into Lower Merion School District because of the quality of their special education services. And as I pointed out, there are a lot of cost increases beyond our control, specifically related to like the tuition and contracted services. And then finally, just to share that there are also expenses within the budget that we do not control. So homebound services for special education students. So if there's a special education student who their medical team, their treating physician, determines that they can't attend school for a short period of time, while they are unable to attend, we still have to provide services in the home. And so we can never predict how many students actually need those services. The day treatment facilities and the court adjudicated placements, the state tells us what amount we have to set aside for that. And then another expense that we don't have control over are the charter schools. So this is actually an increase from last year. Our proposal for 18-19 was $50,000 per student. It's now up to $58,000 per student. This is special education only. We are budgeting for 12 students. We currently have 9 who are in charter schools, and the majority are online charter schools. But we have no control over this expense, and we really don't know the needs, nor are we able to find out the needs of the students who are enrolled in those.
But if they're receiving special education services, aren't we required to evaluate that?
No, so charter schools, even though they are publicly funded, they are their own LEA, which means the child find obligation and the requirements for special education fall onto the charter schools.
So we don't know what the needs are. We don't know, and apparently the state doesn't follow up to determine either. So I just thought I'd add that.
And I just want to, and that's my presentation for today, and I just want to, while I have my team here, also say that this is a collaborative effort. I feel very fortunate to have a strong administrative team doing this work every day. And so I just also want to introduce, I have Terry Quinlan. She's the lead supervisor of health services and student safety. Melissa Sinapi-Gibson is the lead supervisor of special education, and she also supervises special education for grades 9 through 12 plus. And Dr. Adil Naray, who is our lead supervisor of clinical services and gifted education, a phenomenal team who really make this work possible. And thank you for your time today.
Great, thank you very much. That's very comprehensive. Okay. You throughout this, you've given us last year or the current year over what you're proposing. And in that first slide, that's the overall department? Mm-hmm. Okay. So so our special education budget is roughly 47 million?
Correct, that includes gifted education.
Okay, and then the other services that we provide are about 9, 11, 12 million?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I just have a comment about the bringing students back into the district, because I remember that was an issue of part of the, was it
That's
an
correct.
audit or something?
Yep. That's correct.
I think, speaking for me, I think it's something we're proud of.
I agree.
I think that's the right thing.
Great.
And I also, and I agree, even though it's the law, you're not allowed to look at the tuition if you have to. I don't believe that this administration would look at the dollar figure. So I think that you guys look at kids for who they are, and I'm proud of what you guys do for them.
Thank you. Thank you.
How do we support students till the age of 21 when they need it?
So for students who receive special education services, you're entitled to school-age services until the age of 21. So those are typically our students who are working on a functional curriculum, who require work experience, on job coaches. So we have actually a pretty extensive program for 18 to 21-year-olds. We do vocational training, we do community-based instruction, and so as the students are aging, the amount of time that they spend in the community, that they spend on the work experiences themselves, increase as they go through, so that we are able to continue to expand upon their program and really hopefully help them move on to independent living to the degree possible. That's actually another area we're quite proud of.
Do we do any follow-up, as to how our students fare once they've left us?
There are some transition surveys that we do, and I believe that's every 4 to 5 years that we're actually required to do that we look at that. But we don't, as a district, we haven't done any systematic follow-up besides that. But that's always dependent upon families responding, students responding. There's no way without their input to know the outcome.
Right. I just think it would be very interesting to we do this with our general ed students to see, we sent you off to college, were you successful? Because just anecdotally, I'm just thinking of certain students that I know through the years who have been through the program, where back when I was a child, that student would be sitting in a home somewhere, being paid by the state to manage, and now they're participating. They're part of the community, and I didn't know whether we followed up on that at all or knew what kind of success rate we had.
So I traditionally send a letter to every graduate asking them to come back and talk to me about how they're doing. In this year's, and I generally get 15, 20 kids who come back. And this year, a mom came with her child who had special services. And together, she helped her articulate how well she's doing. She's in a community college program right now, and how pleased she was with the work she gets. So it's not scientific,
right,
but it was really nice to see. And she also took the time to say to the kids who were there what a great experience she had with the regular ed students and how well they had treated her daughter. So.
I think that's it, to spin off of that, it's an area that we've also been committed to pulling the programming in districts. So previously, probably about 5 years ago, we were using the IU for a lot of this apartment living program, the work experiences, and we've really been committed to bringing that support in districts so students can do it right here in their home school. We don't lose time in transit, and it's within the community where we expect them to continue to live. And I think that that's been really important. We've actually saved money by being able to do that, and at the same time improved the quality of what we're able to provide.
That's great, thank you. Anybody from your team want to chime in anything? You all good? Any public comment?
Great.
Any other board comments or questions or?
Thank you.
I should get a pat on the back for a 40-minute
You do,
committee meeting.
you do, but I'm not touching anybody's back.
Actually,
I may decide to.
Kim, I'm going to give you a pat on the back from here.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. All right, with that, I guess we're adjourned. Next meeting is, I don't know offhand, you have the 24th?
Staffing and IC.
Okay, April 24th, and it's staffing and IT. So with that, we're adjourned. Thank you.